Greetings, friends, family, enemies, and strangers of all kinds. Welcome back to Extra Milestone, your weekly film anniversary podcast where we take a trip to the past to discover the classic films that have made the cinematic landscape what it is today. And listeners, I'm going to tell you right now, this may just be one of, if not the biggest Extra Milestones yet for a multitude of reasons. Objectively speaking, it has to be because we've got a hell of a lineup of films today. And to go with that, I thought it was only fitting to assemble an enormous lineup of some of my very closest friends and do a bit of a reunion of sorts. Without any further ado, we're going to get right into this, and I am going to introduce my friends in alphabetical order. First up, we have the former co-host of Anyway, That's All I Got, fan of Michael Bay's Armageddon, and staunch denier of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. It is Anthony Battaglia. Welcome back, Anthony.
Oh, it's me, top of the alphabet. Sucks for you guys.
Oh, you're goddamn right. Well, you know what? Not far behind alphabetically is one of my other very closest friends. We have 007 aficionado and stan of Con Air with Nicolas Cage. It is a man whose name John Negroni repeatedly refuses to pronounce correctly, so I'm going to make sure to get it on the record right now. Guy Simons Jr. Welcome back, Guy.
How does he pronounce my name?
Simmons?
He says Simmons. Yeah.
Oh, okay. At that first
For a
name.
second, I thought you were talking like he doesn't know how to pronounce guy. I'm like, wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, I was very confused
Well,
for
I
a
mean,
second. But
for the French, it would be Guy.
Guy.
That
But
was my
no,
French
I've
name. Yeah.
on numerous occasions I've corrected John and said, John, it's Simons. He's like, I got it. The funny John listens back to these, so this is gonna be a fun conversation to have it tomorrow morning.
John, it's Simons.
But but finally, joining us on what is sure to be a hectic and epic Extra Milestone week, returning for the first time in far too long, I say, another one of my very closest friends. It is celebrity face consultant and passive fan of the Star Wars holiday special, something that none of us will ever remotely understand. It is Jason Reed. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you. I couldn't think of another movie to mention before my name besides the holiday special. Movie? Can we call it a movie?
It's you and Will Ashton. I think you're one of the only two people I know.
That would make sense.
Who find some sort of redemptive enjoyment in that abomination.
I enjoy Will's tastes.
There you go.
I agree.
Yes. Well,
The police are on their way to both of your houses.
there you go.
FBI will be kicking down your door.
Multiple jurisdictions, but we'll figure it out. Yeah, lots of busy work, but now is not the time for that. Now is the time to talk about, I dare say, three of the biggest, most significant, and arguably best epics of the 21st century, 20th century. Always get the centuries screwed up. So expect a lot of errors in this podcast because we're having a good time. We have a trio that spans 25 years and only two directors, so it's going to be interesting to discuss them. And I don't always do this, but I am going to announce all of them right up front, give everyone a little taste of the action, let everyone wet their beak a little bit to hear what's in store over the course of this. We are going to start with a conversation on Stanley Kubrick's 1975 passion project, Barry Lyndon, something I'm sure that at least most of us are very excited to talk about, probably all of us. After that, we're going to take a trip back in time just a little bit. We're going to talk about another Stanley Kubrick film, Spartacus, released in 1960, which holds a very interesting place in film history and Kubrick's filmography. So that's going to be fascinating. And then finally, we have a film from my favorite director of all time, one of his most revered works. It is Akira Kurosawa's Ran, released in 1985. What say we just get going, gents?
Diving in?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
We're going to start with, as I said before, just now, it is none other than Barry Lyndon.
Barry Lyndon, a film by Stanley Kubrick, starring Ryan O'Neal and Marissa Berenson, has won the Best Picture and Best Director Award presented by the National Board of Review. Richard Schickel, in a Time magazine 7-page cover story, called the film ravishing, overwhelming, an uncompromised artistic vision, and said, director Stanley Kubrick asserts a claim to greatness that time alone can, and probably will, confirm. CBS TV critic Pat Collins called it a masterpiece, monumental, a perfect film of epic size. Playboy magazine's Bruce Williamson, a film classic. Rex Reed of the New York Daily News wrote, as an 18th century rake's progress, Barry Lyndon catalogs the rise and fall of a likable scoundrel, liar, cheat, and social climber, transporting the viewer into a world of long ago and creating the kind of magic few movies accomplish and few directors attempt in a lifetime. It is a magnificent entertainment, sumptuous, lush, gorgeous, and haunting, a classic of inestimable value. Liz Smith of Cosmopolitan called it a perfect movie. Beautiful, breathtaking, brilliant. Like a gorgeous, fulfilling dream of life, a dream you never want to end. It is not comparable to any other film I can recall. I ask you to turn yourself over to the experience.
So now this is, we're all approaching this from somewhat different angles. So what I want to do is, as I often do on Extra Milestone, I want to get a little bit of a line on everyone's familiarity with the movies that we're going to be discussing. So Anthony Battaglia, I want to ask you first, what is your familiarity, not only with Barry Lyndon itself, but kind of with Kubrick as director at large? Because he's a director that I don't think we've ever discussed via podcast at any great length.
Right. Yeah. I've seen a lot of Kubrick's movies. I've always been drawn to his tone and his mood that he creates. And I was not very familiar with Barry Lyndon before I watched it. This was the first time I watched it for this show. So all I knew about it was that it was set in the past and it's about a weird guy.
Weird guy.
As I watched, it turned out to be an understatement. But it turned out to be my favorite movie of the three of what we're discussing today. So I enjoyed it a lot.
Same.
Very nice. Very nice. I have a strange feeling that we're all on the same page when it comes to the ranking of these three. So, Jason, I want to ask you next. I'll just ask the same question. What's your Kubrick and Barry Lyndon familiarity?
So I guess I don't really know a whole lot about Kubrick. I mean, we know stories of like him working on Shining just being a difficult, controlling director to work with. But that's how he creates his, tight-knit, well-done movies. And Barry Lyndon was a movie that I had started 3-4 times, but always fallen asleep during. Not that it was boring; it just caught me on certain days when I was tired. And the
There are
first
some
time,
movies that are just kind of sleep inducing, you know?
yeah.
A lot of them
and-
directed by Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So the first time I saw it was in theaters this year with you and Guy. And yeah, no, immediate. I rarely give movies 5 out of 5 stars upon first viewing, but this is one of those exceptions. So that's how I feel about it so far.
Very nice.
5 out of 5.
I think we kind of already answered the question for the remaining 2. But Guy, what's your familiarity with Stanley Kubrick, and also how you came to hear about or find out about this movie particularly?
I found out about this movie like 4 or 5 years ago. I've always been a fan of Stanley Kubrick and, all of his movies, because I always loved, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket, all the classics. But this was one that I always kind of avoided because I, was kind of the school of thought that, it's a 3-hour epic. I assumed it wouldn't be as, exciting as some of his other stuff.
Yeah, 3-hour 18th century.
Exactly.
Yeah.
3-hour 18th century. So I kind of avoided it for a long time until, as Jason said, you invited us to go see it in theaters for the first time. And I immediately fell in love with it. I immediately thought it was amazing. I think it's one of his best movies, personally.
I tricked you both. I got you, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, you reeled us in.
Yeah.
I had kind of a similar thing where this was one that I heard about kind of in passing, but I never really heard that many people go into detail about it. And it's occurred to me recently that this movie in particular kind of stands out among Kubrick's filmography as being a little different than most. Part of the reason is because it was more of a passion project. What happened was that I think it was after 2001, A Space Odyssey came out. Kubrick really wanted to make a movie about Napoleon, which there had already been a few of them, but he wanted to do his own. And just one of the great unmade movies that I would have loved more than anything to see. And it ended up falling through for a bit of a time there, and so he ended up making A Clockwork Orange instead. And then it was after that where, that movie was more of a hit than I think a lot of people anticipated and got some Academy Award nominations and stuff. So they kind of wrote the blank check to Kubrick saying, you can do whatever you want. He's like, great, I want to do my historical epic with a very unusual sense of humor. And that's exactly what happened. And it wasn't Napoleon specifically, but it was around that same time period. Kubrick used a lot of the research that he had done to kind of inform how it worked. And it was just one that I heard about. I kept hearing the title of. I kept seeing everyone who'd seen it loved it, and I kept thinking like, all right, today's the day I'm going to watch it. I remember so specifically thinking there were many occasions in which I would wake up and be like, I got to do it. I got to finally cross it off the old list. And it took years until one day I realized, there are only 2 others that I haven't seen, 2 Kubrick movies, I should say, that I haven't seen. One of them is Eyes Wide Shut, and the other is Barry Lyndon. And I wanted to watch Eyes Wide Shut last because it was Kubrick's last movie. So I thought it would be fitting. I finally gave it a watch about a year ago now, actually. And it was like Jason and Guy, it was kind of love at first sight. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. And I've now seen it 3 times, once in theaters, which was legendary.
I own 2 copies of it on Blu-ray. Even before I had even seen it. I owned 2 versions of it, yeah.
That is a very Jason thing to do. Of course, in case someone breaks into Jason's house late at night and feels the need to steal a copy of Barry Lyndon. I got another one. So whatever it is.
I've got 2.
I mean, I have 3 copies of Die Hard.
That's
real.
Yeah, 2 of them Blu-ray and 1's regular, so I can take it anywhere.
Are the 2 Blu-rays the same edition?
No, one is a special edition that came in a special miniature of the Nakatomi Plaza.
Oh.
That's cool.
because that's how
For
nerdy I am about Die
$1,000.
Hard.
Yeah.
Now, Jason, are these two Barry Lyndon copies you have? Are they the same? Are they
No.
they're both the Criterion version?
One of them is the Criterion, and then another one is
Okay.
just a generic Blu-ray.
See, I'll cut you both a little slack, because it would be one thing if they were both like just the same version that you happen to have two of for whatever reason. I am one to talk because I own two of the exact same copy of Yojimbo, so I'm right there. I'm guilty along with everyone else.
I own
Two
two
Criterions
versions of The Dark Knight.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
That's understandable. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes one just isn't enough, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got two eyes, right?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Just put them on
One-
side by side.
One on each
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah.
Double
Put it in my small
the
vision
fun.
for, get all the senses.
Exactly. Yeah. So Guy and Jason and I have kind of already waxed rhapsodic about it a little bit. Anthony, you mentioned that this was your favorite of the three. I want to hear a little bit more about just kind of your general reactions to it, and kind of the way that you maybe discovered it as you were watching it, and just kind of your general takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, I was wary at first because, like you guys have mentioned, it's a 3-hour historical drama. Seemed really boring to me. And I, like, if it wasn't a Kubrick movie, I may never have watched it.
Right.
But I just knew that there's going to be something of value here, whether I enjoy it or not. And I ended up enjoying it a lot. But I wasn't, it did take me a while to get hooked. Because just, I don't know, I approached this movie because I didn't want to. I had that negative, this seems boring mindset before I started. So to get myself out of that mindset, I said I'm going to look at this as cinema as an art form rather than cinema as entertainment. So that's what I watched it as. And right out of the gate, I was like, okay, so this obviously has some of the best cinematography I've ever seen in my life.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, from that first shot.
Yeah.
Immediately.
The whole. I was like, well, now I was not interested in the story. It's two parts. Part one bored me story wise. I did not care.
Part one bored you.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I was not interested. I was bored, and I was like, okay, at least the cinematography is good. And because I do not like Barry. I think he's a jerk, and I was not rooting for him. I was annoyed by him throughout the entire movie.
I completely understand. Yeah.
Part two, for whatever reason, just major shift for me. Like, wow, I could not look away from both the cinematography and the plot. Like, you have the mixture of, I was thrown off by it too. And I with the mixture of the impeccable filmmaking, the framing, the composition of each shot, the editing, the everything, every single aspect, you could just tell masterfully executed.
Yes.
And the plot, I guess the first half kind of felt like almost soap opera-y to me, and the second half, while still soap opera-ish, there was a bit the drama felt more intense for whatever reason, and I think I gravitated to that more, and I could not look away. For the entire part two, I thought it was glorious. I've never seen a movie like this. I'll never see a movie like this again. It was. I thought it was a glorious movie.
That's
so
very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you guys not? Did you guys? It sounds like you guys were flipped. Like you guys liked the first half more than the second half.
I mean, it's not like I didn't like the second half at all, but I think the first half is just incredibly entertaining the entire way through. The second half I think can have some slow moments, but even those moments are still great because of the cinematography, the music that is throughout the whole thing. But that first half, where it's just going from war scenes to duels to really wholesome robbery. And
that was the most polite robbery.
Good old Captain Feeney.
Yeah, so nice. to fisticuff fight scenes, jumping from location to location with no real repeating locations. I thought, the first half flies by, honestly, for me at least. I just find the first half so entertaining, and I still love the second half, but just for different reasons. For that slower, more melancholic feel to it.
Do you not think the entire thing has kind of that melancholic tone to it?
It does, but I think the first half, I don't know. There's comedy in the first half. There's not a whole lot.
I think there's comedy all throughout. I think it's a very unique kind of comedy.
Yeah.
The final duel was hilarious.
Oh, that was great. Yeah. No, his son is hilarious. Yeah. So many funny characters in this.
I laughed like a maniac all throughout this. Like it's really became clear to me with this third viewing just how funny this all is, like being a little more familiar with the events throughout. That's so fascinating what you two are mentioning about kind of the way the two halves interact with each other. I want to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But Guy, did you have a thought on that? Did you have one specific act of the movie that you kind of favored over the other or anything like that?
Yeah, I agree more with Anthony, honestly. I enjoy both halves, but I did enjoy the second half more because I think I also kind of gravitated more towards the just dramatic and like melancholy feel of the second half. To me, it felt like there was less comedy. I still think there is comedy in the second half, but it felt like there was less of it, and it felt much more dreary to me, and I kind of gravitated more towards that.
Yeah, I guess the dreariness really, I don't know, is accentuated by that, like, I don't even know what to call, like, the cinematography where it looks like greasy almost, you know what I mean? But not in like a gross way, right. Where, I don't know, just light has such a specific look in this movie that really is not present in any other movie.
Something about the second half just feels like a little more claustrophobic to me, and I don't know, I like that.
I think there's definitely a reason for that. I think this movie is very clearly divided into two acts, which is strange considering how long it is. So that means each act is like 90 minutes long, which is 3 times as long as the normal act that we're used to in most traditional stories. I do feel the need to, real quick, just sort of give a little background on what these two acts are that we're talking about, in case anyone doesn't know. It is it's kind of like a Tarantino movie where there are 2 different chapters that are introduced via a title card. The first one, and I really should have written down exactly what it is. Actually, I have it right here. I can look it up. Part 1, by what means Redmond Barry acquired the style and title of Barry Lyndon.
I think that's exactly it.
Well, of course, because I'm reading it off the Wikipedia page.
I thought that was off the head. Okay.
I mean, yes, it was. I just remembered it off the top of my head.
Off the dome.
Right off the old noggin there. Okay. And then part 2, and this is completely off the top of my head. I'm not reading off the Wikipedia page, containing an account of the misfortunes and disasters which befell Barry Lyndon. Totally not reading that. So
yeah, no, that's close. That's close.
Yeah, I think something like that.
I'm such a silly goose, and it's very much a 2-act thing where in the first act is the rise and then the second one is the fall. Like that's very clearly where the divide is made. They are separated by an intermission. Fun fact, Jason, Guy, I don't know if you remember this. We almost missed the return back from the intermission when we saw it at the theater where I work, because we were admiring the inner workings of the theater auditorium itself, and then we heard the Barry Lyndon music start back up and had to like sprint back to our seats.
Scurried back to our seats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always think of that whenever there's an intermission in a movie, because it's this weird thing where like on home video releases, they'll shorten the intermission. I wish they would keep it completely intact, like the exact
same.
amount of length that it is.
Yeah, I forgot. I got up to get a snack during it, and then it just started up real quick, and
that's how it works.
Scurry back to my seat.
You got to be on your toes with these intermission things.
Yeah.
And my favorite intermission of all time, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's like 3 seconds long as they're walking across a bridge. One of my favorites. But yeah, that is basically the deal. The first one is Redmond Barry, played by Ryan O'Neal, who was a rising star at the time, had some success and would still go on to have a lot of other success in a lot of auteur projects of the 70s specifically, which is what a lot of the 70s was. And this is certainly among the very best, I would say. Is an Irish boy at the beginning of the movie who's just sort of stricken by love initially, and a lot of things happen. He ends up sort of working his way into the aristocracy and fighting various wars, various battles, never settling in one place for too long. And then right at the end of the first half, marries a rich woman and is now royalty. And the second act of the movie, after the intermission, is sort of the fall from grace, if indeed there ever was any grace, and lots of rivalries ensue in both halves. And yeah, it's a hell of a journey that this character and the audience takes. So Guy, I already asked you sort of how you viewed the two separate halves. Here's a question I want to ask specifically, because I already kind of brought it up a second ago, but both the first and second time that you saw this movie, when it comes to the sense of humor, what did you make of that? Did it strike you as being something different than a lot of similar movies as its kind, or what was kind of your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's kind of odd. It's very like offbeat and like very, very dry and very British, which is something that I like. I usually tend to gravitate towards, that British dry humor, which is why it's kind of odd that I liked the second half more. But yeah, first half I enjoy the dryness of it all.
Nice. Yeah, I think most of the actors are giving relatively straightforward performances, I would say, but there are a few that just go like above and beyond. Specifically there, and I got to look up this actor here. The guy who plays the first, or at least the prior husband of the woman that Redmond Barry would end up.
Sir Charles.
Sir Charles has this just sort of flip out scene. The actor's name is Frank Middlemass, and that's right at the end of part one, before Barry kind of infiltrates into Lady Lyndon's love, who's played by Marissa Berenson. And it's a hysterical scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of really hysterical characters like Sir Charles and the other, I definitely don't know this character's name, but that other guy who is in one of the gambling scenes. I think he's only really in the one gambling scene, but he's the guy who has a woman on each side of him. And just
very
people's faces in this just make me laugh.
Very well composed fellow.
Yeah.
This is just kind of a normal day for him. You can tell.
Or the Reverend turning I don't even know.
Turning the
Reverend,
page.
but, turning the page
kills me every time.
Never looks down at the pages, but still turns them.
You remember his name, right?
No, actually, I don't.
Runt?
Reverend Runt.
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds like a Monty Python character.
Exactly, it
Truly.
does. It does. Anthony, what did you make of the sense of humor in this movie? Do you think it kind of came alive in the second half, or was it always there? Was it never there? What was your thoughts on that?
I think it was always there. To me, like I laughed a lot during the movie. I think the, like Guy was saying, the dry, it is very British. That really shined through to me. And I thought the stepson, his stepson was the funniest character. I
Lord Bullingdon.
Just that little brat, and then he grew up to be a bigger brat, but slightly more mature. And it was
everyone's a brat in this. It's
that dynamic.
Yeah,
is hysterical to me, and I thought he was really funny to watch. The whipping scenes, I don't know how funny those were supposed to be, but they were pretty funny.
They're hilarious.
Yeah. Him just choking on his tears. That is so good. He is fantastic.
Especially when he's grown up and he's just having more of a reaction than the younger version did. He's I'll kill you if you do it again. It's very funny.
Here's the way I read that, and I love that you brought this up. The way that I read that was that as when he was disciplined, corporal punishment is the deal here, is the racket we're delving into here. I got the sense that as a kid, the punishment was less severe. Like Barry wasn't being as harsh with it because he was a kid, but now he's an adult and feels like, I don't have to hold back. I don't have to pull my punches or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's even funnier to think that it's the exact same level of force, and it's just become that much more dramatic. having sort of
that's how I want to think of it.
I think that's a good way to look at it. Having sort of been away for some time, the scene that I always find really hysterical is when Lord Bullingdon, Barry's stepson, and Barry's biological son, little Brian Lyndon, who's a little boy, they're
turd is what he is.
Even more so than Lord Bullingdon, I would say. Mm-hmm. And although only so much can be blamed, it is just a kid, but even still, and they just have to fight about something, and little Brian is just constantly badgering Lord Bullingdon, like, what does this word mean?
What does
and eventually says,
mean?
Strenuous. What is strenuous?
Exactly. I lost my pencil. You took it. And then they get into like a full-on wrestling match.
A quarrel.
Yeah, it's
a tiff.
It's hysterical. Here's the thing that I think I felt kind of similar feelings all three times, as kind of eccentric, as kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Just I think bratty is kind of the perfect word. As Lord Bullingdon is, I think the movie is kind of punishing him a little bit, and we're meant to sort of feel for him a little bit, because what happens is that his father has died suddenly, and then in comes this other man who really doesn't care much for him and is marrying his mother, and we find out very quickly that Barry cares very little about his new wife, openly cheats on her and everything, treats her with very little reverence. Only the occasional, literally, right after she asks him not to. I remember that getting a big laugh in the theater. Mm-hmm. And just kind of openly disrespecting her. So I got to think, if I'm Lord Bullingdon in this situation, of course I'm going to feel a little bit of resentment. And because they're both kind of childish at heart to different extents, but they're both just kind of immature and undeveloped, I find myself sympathizing a little bit more with Lord Bullingdon, to the point where, and this is maybe a little bit of a spoiler to how the movie concludes, but in the end, when after this prolonged duel with a pair of pistols, Lord Bullingdon ends up winning functionally, I find myself getting very satisfied by that. And then, of course, the epilogue that follows. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I loved the ending and their duel. I thought it was hysterical and tragic and sad. Mm-hmm. And I'm right there with you with sympathizing with Lord Bullingdon, because I also, like, his mother, she never did anything wrong. She was a good character.
Right. And
she just totally gets screwed over while Barry whores his way through Europe. As he's done the whole movie. And it's just very, it is, it's very tragic. And I think, as, bratty as Lord Bullingdon is, I was rooting for him at the end.
Mm-hmm. I think the movie, what you were talking about earlier about how Barry is kind of a bastard. I think, yes, absolutely. I think that's actually kind of the outspoken ethos, is that here's this character who from the very beginning has, swears no allegiances or anything. And not that there's anything wrong with that. In fact, that's rather admirable a lot of the time, but is clearly just going about the world driven by lust and envy and kind of nothing in between. It's mostly just those two and maybe some greed. So that's like almost half of the deadly sins right there are this character's main driving forces. And then once he finally gets to a level of success by marrying into a family, not even accomplishing anything, like he's made it this far, yes, but really hasn't done anything to earn it, and then just kind of lives off of it, and then loses all of it very quickly, realizes that there's nothing there and that it's just kind of an empty way of life to seek out success and then do nothing once you find it. It speaks to the tragedy of the movie, and I think it makes for a really interesting protagonist,
Yeah. How old is Barry supposed to be in the beginning?
Oh, goodness.
We know. I don't think it specifically says, but...
Well, he's younger than his cousin, isn't he?
Right. Yeah.
And she's of marrying age. So is he supposed to be like teenager somewhere older teenager?
Somewhere around there.
Then?
I have
That's true. Marrying age
12,
could be 15. Who knows?
Exactly, like 14 years old. Who knows?
Yeah.
My prediction is somewhere like early 20s. I think that's the way that the character is kind of played.
Okay, yeah, because he acts like a child in the beginning, and, and that's my favorite stuff. Is he's just the most pathetic person, and he just gets put in these situations where everything just works out so well for him, and I just find that so funny.
He like gains his fortune not through wit or charm or anything.
Complete.
He just is. It's like, oh, look how cute. He's stupid.
Yeah. Just when you think like his stupid choices are coming back to get him, like they turn around and work out. Up until the end, of course. But I don't know. I know a lot of people will find that annoying, but that's one of my favorite parts of this.
I think annoying is an interesting way to describe it, and I think it's definitely a fair reaction to have, while also, of course, enjoying kind of the dry sense of humor throughout. And one of the first things that Barry does, the thing that kind of sets him about his journey, is that he challenges to a duel the man who is set to marry his cousin of all people.
Fantastic too,
Captain Quinn.
Oh, he's fantastic.
His dance.
Man. He's hilarious. Oh, he's hilarious. Yeah. Oh, his just shaking anger and fear during that first duel. Oh my God.
He's impossibly British.
Yeah.
And I love the way that it's interesting, because I remember the first time I was watching this, as the duel was like just getting started, I was thinking to myself, this is ridiculous. How did anyone let it get this far? And then Captain Quinn says that exact same thing. Like, listen, can we just put this behind us? This is ridiculous. And Barry's like, no, and shoots him.
Because he's such a little
I demand
bastard.
Satisfaction.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Oh, man.
Exactly. Just so entitled.
Oh, I love him. I think Ryan O'Neal is so good in this. He's just the softest man ever.
That you can totally believe would be this insidious dickhead,
Yeah, he's got like those like really soft puppy dog eyes, and then like a I don't even know how to describe his voice, but it's like pleasantly like
approachable,
but also like you want to hit him. Like, I don't know. It's
it's hard to describe.
think
that's accurate. I think puppy dog is a good way to go about it, because like he's just pissing on the rug the whole movie. You want to just shove his nose in it. Like, look what you're doing. Like, do you not see this?
Why are you doing this?
Oh, it's so crazy, because he's just this frustrating, but in my opinion, entertaining guy. Like, I wanted him to succeed for a while, and then he's got that fight scene where he challenges a much bigger man, and just
the bone saw fight
beats the hell out of him. The hell out of him.
Really,
it's great.
When I say approachable, what I meant is that you want to approach him so that you can hit him. So I think it all works.
Exactly.
It all works out.
You want
in
to
the
get
end.
close enough so your fist can hit his face.
What I love is that after that initial fight, when he kills Captain Quinn, or so he thinks, there's kind of a bizarre reversal later in the movie, doesn't even stick around. Just takes off. Like, well, I've killed this man for no good reason. I'm going to take some money and be on my way. And what I love...
Off to Germany.
Exactly. Just to, see what awaits me. I've always been a wanderer. And there is, I just got to mention real quick, we've already gushed about the cinematography, but there is this one shot right after Barry leaves and right before he arrives at this village where he meets Captain Feeney, who would later rob him blind. There is this shot of just Barry riding on a horse like around this bend that is possibly my favorite shot in cinema history, just aesthetically. Like, it is unlike anything I've ever seen. But what I love is that he takes that money and immediately loses it all. Like, it's this constant cycle throughout the movie of just ups and downs and ups and downs. And it ends with just the ultimate down. And it leaves the movie on this tone of how history is this perpetual cycle of just like, all right, just keep it moving. Like, nothing lasts forever. We literally don't matter. I think that's the thing I love the most about this movie. Does that make sense what I'm describing there?
Oh yeah.
For sure.
It's especially with the end title card, which is it, and it took me 3 times to really appreciate kind of the way it really wraps the entire movie up. But the way it says, like, and all this stuff happened. We saw like basically an entire life story, or at least the parts that mattered. And after this happens, things just kind of worked out from there. Like, it's so flippant about the way that it describes that it just kind of sums up all the events, not necessarily specifically of the plot, but just kind of the way that history passes us by. And although we are, how should I say this? In our own mind, we are like the most important person in the world, like the only person that matters in some cases.
We are the hero of our own story.
Exactly. Yeah. Even though that is the case for everyone, history does not give a damn. Right. And is it weird that I find this weird piece in that?
No, I do too, honestly. I do. The movie like does make me feel like kind of okay about it. I can't tell you why.
Like, just that, things will happen and we have so little control over them. It's kind of pointless to even care,
Right. Exactly. I don't know why
Jason,
I gravitate towards that.
Jason, has that little subtext ever occurred to you?
Yes. No, I think it has. Yeah, just the kind of canceling that you talk about with, ups and downs. Just really,
And that we're seeing it all unfold in such a deliciously humorous way. It's almost like this huge prank that Kubrick is pulling on the audience, and that I can tell that Kubrick thinks that only he's in on the joke. Like, I'll bet you anything that if while Stanley Kubrick was alive, if anyone were to watch this movie in a theater with him, not unlike Orson Welles and John Huston watching the movie The Trial, that he was probably dying laughing throughout all of it, while like everyone was probably shushing him, trying to take it seriously, like, no, this is a serious drama. I'll bet you Kubrick was like, well, yes, but also no, this is all really pointless in the end, and it's just all a bunch of nonsense that we occupy our lives with. And yet I'm dramatizing it like it's the most epic story that's ever been told. And that's kind of what I love the most about this, is the way that it sort of interacts with itself to become something really kind of profound. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you think that, like, I know Anthony said this, but were you like intimidated by the well, first of all, like the runtime, but also just being set in the 18th century? Because I know that a lot of movies taking place in that time can be a little hard to, like, decipher what the characters are actually saying, just because there's such a barrier between how we talk now and how they used to talk.
Yeah, just kind of the language and the syntax and everything.
Yeah. Were you ever like intimidated by just watching a movie that took place back then?
Not that specifically, I don't think. I think it was probably more so the runtime than anything.
Yeah.
But weirdly enough, I've learned to become like very welcoming of longer movies. In doing a lot of longer stuff on this show and others that I've done and everything. So I don't think it was that necessarily. Plus, it's, even before seeing it, I was like, okay, well, I know I'm going to at least find something enjoyable in this. Like I a lot of Kubrick's movies, not a lot, but there are some Kubrick movies that don't work. I don't think any of them are boring. So I was not thinking that this would be that. And runtime is a thing to take into account. That, come to think of it, that's probably the reason why I kind of prolonged it for so long. Waited so long to get to it.
For sure.
What about you, Guy? Was there anything specifically that kind of kept you away for as long as it did?
Definitely the runtime. the time period never really scared me off. I kind of enjoy the time period, the sort of highfalutin language of that, that
It's
era.
so unbelievably stuffy.
Exactly. There's something about that I always kind of enjoyed. It was mainly just the runtime.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, so. Oh, sorry. Go on.
No, I was just gonna say something stupid.
No, please say it. I would love to hear it.
I was just gonna say that if you showed anyone like an individual frame of this movie, there are a lot of people who would take one look at it and be like, no, I'm not interested. And then come to find out that there's actually a lot of wit and zazz to this that is not in a lot of period pieces of this ilk. So definitely I would recommend this before other similar movies that are set in a similar time period, mostly for those reasons, for the tonal approach and everything.
That's why I brought this up, is because I can't think of an example right now, but other movies that I've seen from this time period, it can be pretty difficult to decipher what it is they're saying, or what they're trying to say, and it can get a little boring in other movies. I don't know, just incredibly wordy and difficult.
Yeah, I think the only example I can think of, I remember one of my first thoughts during this movie was that you guys remember the movie The Favorite came out? Was it last year?
Yes, that's.
I remember thinking
example.
The Favorite wishes it was this movie. That's how That's how I interpreted it, because I seen The Favorite first, and I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I liked a lot about it, but I did not like it that much. And while I was watching Barry Lyndon, I was like, "Oh, so this is what The Favorite was trying to be." And it did not
because it keeps the time period lingo, all that, but you can still understand every single thing every person's saying. It's every line is entertaining. You're not really lost with anything.
Yeah, you don't have to decode any of it.
Yeah, the only part that I had trouble with is the insult that he gives that one guy, where it's like, is that a towel of your wife's washing or whatever it is?
Oh, yeah.
I'm still not sure about that line.
Wicked burn.
The guy's like,
but you can.
There's
you
this
can
other
just feel the power
mischievous
of it.
dude feeding him insults.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
That's what's going on. I want to know who's this guy who's just stirring up shit. Like, does he do this all the time?
He wants to say something, it.
Yeah. But says like, I'm gonna wait for like a cipher to come in so that I can, have them test out the lines that I've always wanted to say.
Yeah,
for the drama.
Exactly. It does work out nicely that way. Yeah, that's interesting that you bring up The Favorite, Anthony. I remember when The Favorite came out, actually, a lot of comparisons to Barry Lyndon were made, and this is before I'd seen Barry Lyndon, so I was like, oh wow, okay, so we're in for something a little more unconventional than just kind of the average, like, here's some stuff that happened and historical, thingies and everything like that, because that's how these movies are pitched, historical thingies.
Yeah.
And
so that's Kubrick's words exactly.
It did lead
in the script
precisely. Stan, come here. What's this? Historical thingies?
Is this nonsense?
We're gonna need a new title.
You think they'd question him? No.
No.
Of
They
course
just
not. Yeah, like I said, this was a blank check movie. It could have very well been titled lots of things, like Lord Bullingdon's Redemption. That could have been one of them.
Out of
I think they chose a great title.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, those comparisons did lead me to believe that it would be a little bit more character focused, a little more irreverent, so to speak, and maybe even a little more kind of mocking of the time period. And I think that's something that, like I said before, with the sense of humor, you will pick up on very quickly if you're seeing this movie for the first time, is that these are these are, stuffed shirt, powdered wigs, kind of things going on, but they're also not presuming any huge amount of portent. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not thinking to themselves, like, this is history right here. They know it's kind of dumb, and
this movie
makes a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, it played really great with a crowd, surprisingly.
Yeah, it really
when
did.
we saw it in theaters, people were laughing throughout.
Oh yeah, and we were 3 of them, so that was nice.
Yeah.
I need that in my life again. I really do.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
We cannot lose that. But yeah, getting beyond the sadness. Anthony, I want to ask, you mentioned that you'd seen a handful of Kubrick movies. Where, off the top of your head, where do you think this would rank among them? Like, I imagine it's probably higher on the list.
I think so. I think 2001, probably my top.
Mm-hmm.
Full Metal Jacket, probably number 2. I think I need to rewatch The Shining, but I'm pretty sure The Shining is going to be number 3. But this might be right behind The Shining to me. I think it's very, I think The Shining does more in terms of, like, shock value and things we haven't seen done in cinema before. But this takes it in a direction of, like, the level of production blows me away on this movie. Like, they went to the places. Like, if this movie was made today, they wouldn't have done it as much. They would have done a lot of green screen. It would have looked bad. But, like, I remember thinking there's a specific shot in the movie. Almost all of the movie feels like an actual painting. And I think a lot of that has to do with the amount of makeup every single character wears, because that's just the way the world was then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It kind of removes them. It doesn't make them look as real. And the way film and light, because they use a lot of natural lighting, the way that all worked, it just felt like a painting to me. And there's once, you guys remember the shot where it's towards the end and he's in the boat with the dog and his son and they're fishing. And then it's just that slow zoom and there's the bridge and there's the castle. I'm like, this is a literal moving painting. And
the zooms.
I think
zooms.
So many dramatic zooms,
beautiful.
especially there's like 5 within 5 minutes. It's amazing.
So good.
And I think because this feels so different to me, I would put this high up on my Kubrick list. It's just so impressive. That's the best way I can say it. It's just so impressive.
I'm glad to hear it. And yeah, the cinematography was actually considered rather groundbreaking. There weren't a lot of movies at the time that a lot of them were shot on location, but that went this above and beyond with making it look like the greatest goddamn thing that had ever been made. And they succeeded. Oscar-winning cinematography, rightfully so. John Alcott is a cinematographer on that, who actually also did a lot of other really famous movies, some for Stanley Kubrick, was the cinematographer for 2001 and A Clockwork Orange and The Shining. So
Good resume.
Damn good cinematographer there. Would you watch it again? Do you think, maybe not like tonight or anything, but do you think this is something that you could see yourself revisiting?
Yeah, I want to show it to somebody. I want to watch it with somebody.
To kind of see their reaction?
Yeah, particularly somebody who maybe isn't that familiar with this style of film. Like, I have a lot of friends who, they don't watch anything before the 90s or something. And it just makes me want to slap them. And if
they're out there, they're out there.
I think this is a type of movie where it would be torturous until they get hooked,
which will happen, as has been established.
No matter what, there will be a part of this movie that you cannot look away from, whether you enjoy it, whether you don't, whether you're fascinated. I want to see that from somebody. I want to see the pain in their eyes. It's like a historical drama from the 18th. Oh my God, this sounds horrible. And then, I can't look away. I want to see the turn, because I know where the turn was for me. I want to see where it is for everybody else.
Interesting. Yeah, for me it was when the credits started rolling, when that when the giant overture theme starts. I remember when Jason and Guy and I saw it, we were humming that the entire time I was driving them back home.
Yeah.
And I know we're going to be humming it for the rest of the night. And
I watched it twice in the past 2 days.
Oh, did you really?
Nice.
Did the second viewing shed any interesting light that you hadn't had before?
I mean, the second viewing was me just really trying to show my family the movie, and none of them wanted to see it.
Yeah.
Because, like Anthony said, it's difficult to really be excited and show people a movie from this time. It seems weird to certain people.
If they're committed to it not being for them, then they will fulfill that commitment. I think that much is clear.
Mm-hmm. They didn't watch it, but I watched it again, and I love it.
There you go.
That's all that matters. I wish I had seen this movie when I was 16 years old. I think that would have been the perfect time, because that was when I was just starting to get into a lot of the history of cinema, from across all time periods, all genres and stuff. And this would have blown my mind. And it did, even seeing it at however old I was a year ago. It's... I know that's a weird thing to say, but
hard numbers to crunch.
Who knows?
I know, right?
I mean, really do that math.
Math has never been my strong suit.
Let me find my calculator.
Maybe one day.
Call my tax guy.
There you go.
My tax guy's name is Barry Lyndon.
What a coincidence.
How weird.
Hey, Barry.
Barry, yeah. One thing, one more thing specifically that I do want to bring up is kind of something I mentioned a little bit earlier, is this movie's place amongst Stanley Kubrick's career. First, I want to ask you, Jason. You are actually on an Extra Milestone earlier this year, where we talked about The Shining. I know you'll always be partial to that one, but where does this rank for you? Where do you think you would place this?
Yeah, I think this third viewing, which was actually this morning, really cemented it as my second favorite. I think tied with 2001, possibly. I guess I'd have to watch 2001 again, but I might even put Barry Lyndon above 2001. I can't be. I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd have to watch 2001 again. But I
mean, I think it is
Barry
hard
Lyndon
to tell which is.
Right now.
How can you decide which is better shot? Because they're so differently shot.
Yeah.
But they're both masterpieces of cinematography, and that's one thing I would never be able to decipher.
Yeah. Same with music, and I can't tell which one is better music.
I gotta admit, I've been kind of racking my brain for a couple of hours now. This may have, it was in my top 3 immediately when I saw it. It was this, Paths of Glory, and 2001. This may have taken the top space. It just keeps getting higher. So it's so hard to decide. The thing I've always said is that if you're technically including everything, as in all the shorts, all the B movies, everything that Kubrick did, there are 16 feature films, of which I've seen all of them. And I have said that 9 of them are like God level, and 7 of them are just not particularly good. The worst of which being The Seafarers, which is a documentary about naval enthusiasts.
Ooh, exciting.
And that's it. It very much seems like this kind of thing that was commissioned to Kubrick. Like, all right, Stan, your first assignment is you got to make a documentary picture about the exciting world of being a seafarer in this little town. And it got just as much enthusiasm as it deserved. Like, I remember nothing about that movie, but those top 9 are just undeniably among the greatest that there are, and this is at least in my top 3, possibly even my top 1. Like, it's so hard to decide, but like I said, just kind of that spiritual enlightenment that I get from watching this movie it cannot be argued with. Guy, how many Kubrick movies do you think you've seen?
Ooh, I mean, I've seen all the hits. I don't know if I've seen all the B-sides.
Way the hits. Yeah.
You've never seen the Flying Padre from 1953?
Can't
now
say
you're just making things up.
I swear to God.
Making titles
Swear
up.
to God. Look that up. That's a short about a biplane.
Oh,
Good.
that sounds exciting. That might
Precisely.
be my new number 1.
Exactly. Yeah, watch it and find out.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah. But so a decent number, I take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are you kind of in the same boat that it's rather high amongst them?
Oh, for sure. I think The Shining is probably still my favorite of his, and then I think I would put 2001 next, and then this one.
We've got 2 Shining bros in the house, I see.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of The Shining.
Here's Jason. I love it.
Here I am.
Yeah, I think this might be my my third of his.
I'm picturing just that shot with Jack Nicholson's face poking through, except it's Jason's face. Like, hey, what's
It's me,
up?
Jason.
Just checking in on you.
The door's locked.
What's that about?
I had to use an axe to get in, guys.
I've been
Come
knocking
on.
for an hour.
Come on, Wendy. Give me another chance. Oh,
Hand over that bat.
That's brilliant. Oh my. Yeah, the reason I bring that up is because there's, as I said before a couple times actually, this holds a very unique place in Kubrick's career. I think that was partly because of just chronologically where it's located, right between, let's say geographically, screw it. Geographically, it's right between Clockwork Orange and The Shining, which are 2 movies that, for lack of a better term, have gained a lot of mainstream appeal in the past 40, 50 years that they've each been out. This is right in the middle of them. It's unlike either of them. And I think there are clearly a lot of thematic leanings that are clearly very Kubrickian. As I said, kind of that existential nothingness is very similar to a lot of what 2001 and Clockwork Orange are getting at. And this is definitely there. But it's just kind of this weird beast. And it's not often brought up by a lot of people who aren't taking a deep dive, who aren't making a point to see everything. Does anyone have a theory on maybe why that is, besides the obvious that it's a period piece that's really long and everything?
I mean, maybe it just doesn't get that much attention in terms of, because he does have such a impressive resume. Like you hear like Shining, Full Metal Jacket, like you said, the movies that have popular appeal.
Yeah.
This certainly does not have popular appeal. It has artistic appeal, but
Right.
I think that maybe that's why people don't talk about it as much.
Yeah, I think that's the reason why a lot of cinephiles will really like it and really kind of advocate for it and push for it to get more attention.
Yeah, I mean, we've been nerding out about it for an hour.
Exactly. So, and this may be an arbitrary question, but I want to put just a little spin on it. If someone had never seen a Kubrick movie before, would this be a good introduction, or would it be too alienating?
I mean, personally, I'd show something. Yeah, I'd show something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you want to make them a
person.
fan first, and then
Exactly.
show them this.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Like, look at what do you guys think is the most, for lack of a better word, commercial movie he's made?
Probably The
Shining.
Shining, honestly.
I'd
It's
say
a
probably
Stephen
The
King
Shining.
novel. It's horror. It's got a lot of recognizable
Right.
stars. It's
Yeah.
probably the one.
I'd say either that or Full Metal Jacket, because a lot
that's
of
a
people
good
like
one.
war movies. I
Yeah,
think if you
everyone
show
loves
those,
war
and then
movies,
they go, "Who's this Kubrick guy? I want to see more." Then you show this movie.
Yeah.
And then
I would also
Eyes
say-
Wide Shut.
I would say you got to do Eyes Wide Shut last. I can
Yeah.
attest to that, but I would also throw in maybe Clockwork Orange as an introduction, just if they're into like the more, for lack of a better term, mature thematic material. That would be a good one to start with, because that's a very fast-paced, enjoyable movie. There's so many great ones to choose from. But yeah, I think we've talked a lot about Barry Lyndon. I think we've gone on about a lot of the things that we like about it, that we maybe don't like about it. Of course, we could go on for much, much longer, but we do have to move on sooner or later. So let's stop talking about this Kubrick movie. And let's talk about another one. Let's talk about another one. And this is interesting, and I did not plan this when I kind of put together the lineup for this week. It's another one that kind of sticks out from Kubrick's filmography and there's a lot more of a reason for this one, which we'll get into. It is the 1960, first century BC epic Spartacus.
9 Roman armies have been destroyed by Spartacus.
Spartacus, a motion picture unequaled in the entire history of filmmaking, unlikely ever to be surpassed in the tenderness and beauty of its love story. Nothing was spared to make Spartacus the superb achievement it is. Neither time, nor money, nor talent. For in Spartacus, you will see the finest cast ever assembled, relive history's most exciting and inspiring drama. Starring Kirk Douglas as Spartacus, slave, gladiator, invincible fighter. Laurence Olivier as Crassus, symbol of Rome's majesty and might.
I'm not after glory. I'm after Spartacus.
Gene Simmons as the slave Erinia, whose body was bought and sold, but whose love enveloped Spartacus with a radiance few men have known.
I love you, I love you.
Charles Lawton as Gracchus, the leader of the Roman Senate. Peter Ustinov as Batiatus, shrewd and devious dealer in human flesh. John Gavin as Julius Caesar, ambitious staff officer. And Tony Curtis as Antoninus, who loved Spartacus like a brother. In the powerful story of the gladiator rebel who sprang from slavery to challenge the awesome might of imperial Rome.
The symbol of the Senate. All the power of Rome. I imagine a God for slaves. And I pray.
What do you pray for?
I pray for a son who'll be born free.
Now, first, I just want to take the time to say that I am Spartacus.
Yeah, I am Spartacus.
Actually, I am Spartacus.
I'm not.
So that's how
You
it's
guys
going
are.
to be.
Yeah. I don't want to get crucified. I'm good. I'm not him.
Speak for yourself. Yeah, I bet there was one guy in that crowd
Yeah.
who was
Me.
the Jason
Yeah.
of the crowd.
He just mouths it.
I love it. You know,
it's that dude up front.
that famous scene, it's like the Holy Grail from Monty Python, from Indiana Jones 3, where it's like the one that you don't think will be the Holy Grail. Aha! That's it. And that's probably what the deal was. As it turns out, to make the intended sound effect for that scene in which all of these escaped slaves who are rebelling and revolting all yell, "I'm Spartacus," to defer the blame away from the actual leader. The way that Kubrick did that was he went to a football stadium and somehow convinced everyone there to yell it out at the same time. Like, I don't know how. That's very impressive, and those are some very compliant fans, I suppose, because God knows there would be some rebels now who would just be like, "No, I'm going to yell something else ridiculous," you know?
Football fans love Kubrick, right?
I mean, I guess they did in 1960 when he'd done like 2 big movies.
Yeah.
And was a director for hire on this thing. This thing, of the 3 movies that we're going to talk about today, I think Spartacus easily has the most fascinating kind of backstory to it. Does anyone here, Guy, I take it that you're aware of some of it. Anthony, Jason, what do you know about kind of how this came to be?
Well, it's Dalton Trumbo, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Bryan Cranston himself.
Yeah. Bryan Cranston, played by Dalton Trumbo. The whole blacklist thing, and this was Kirk Douglas came around and he's like, "I want you to write this, and I'm going to put your name in the credits." You know, it was a big risky move for Kirk Douglas.
Bold move.
One thing I found out.
Yeah, and he
go ahead, Jason.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, Trumbo wasn't like allowed on set, right? Like I heard they had to like sneak him in.
Not initially, though. It wasn't it wasn't until Kirk Douglas advocated for him to be allowed into the studio that ended up happening. And I think, and this is just a quote, it probably did not go down exactly this way, but the quote that I read was that Trumbo said to Kirk Douglas, "Thank you, Kirk, for giving me back my name." And that's got to be really
exactly
powerful.
What was said. Yeah.
Dalton Trumbo, who was a writer who was blacklisted for alleged alignment with the Communist Party in the 1950s, ghost wrote a lot of famous movies, most notably Roman Holiday before this with
love that movie.
Audrey Hepburn and Gregory Peck. It's so good. If you haven't seen Roman Holiday, definitely check it out. And this is kind of funny. One thing I found out is that the pseudonym that he was writing under, Sam Jackson. How about
that? Oh, wow.
Say what again, Spartacus?
Why is that funny? Who's Sam Jackson? I don't get it.
Jason, you're such an ass. You know exactly who we're talking about. Samuel L. Jackson would have been 12 years old at the time, so not nothing that anyone would have made a joke about at the time.
Terrifying.
Exactly.
Just as
exactly. And there's actually a lot. We've already kind of touched on it a little bit. A lot of fascinating stuff went into this. It initially came about when, and I didn't know this, Kirk Douglas did not get the lead role in William Wyler's Ben-Hur, a role that would ultimately go to Charlton Heston, and he was actually rather upset about that and said, "Well, I'm going to do my own." Pre-Christ epic, and he got a hold of this book by Howard Fast, who wrote the novel Spartacus, based on the actual slave who escaped and sort of led a rebellion in the 1st century BC. And what happened was that Howard Fast was initially going to adapt his own book to film, and it just wasn't working out. Like, they were trying and failing, and we were like, okay, we got to get this Trumbo guy. And Kirk Douglas was a really heavy advocate of ending the blacklist, which was essentially the 1960s version of when someone was canceled. It's interesting how we're going through a little bit of a similar thing now, where just everyone was disassociating with someone because of these things, real or not, like justified or otherwise, alleged.
It was like
true.
A witch hunt.
Right. They were
like
kind of
finger pointing. That guy's a communist, and then he'd get fired the next day after no investigation.
Sniffing out communists. Yeah. Just trying to alienate everyone else, watch the 1956 Invasion of the Body Snatchers if you want a really interesting kind of allegorical sci-fi angle on that whole time period. It's really, really fascinating. But yeah, and they were essentially like Hollywood curse words, essentially. They were like George Lucas in the year 2011. Like you couldn't even say their name without getting a whole lot of venom as a result. And so they had to write under pseudonyms for a lot of it. And Kirk Douglas was like, we got to stop this. And almost single-handedly ended it. Like he was the one who really advocated, I should say, for getting Trumbo's name in the credits, which indeed is there. You watch the movie now, you see written by Dalton Trumbo.
It's glorious.
And JFK, once the movie came out, kind of broke the blacklist and went to see the movie. I think maybe it would like crossed a picket line or something. And that was kind of it right there. Like it died over the course of a year, the entire blacklist and everything. The most interesting fun fact I read about Spartacus is that there was another actor who was really wanting to make specifically a Spartacus movie around that time. And because Kirk Douglas beat him to it, Yul Brynner's Spartacus was never made.
That would have been interesting.
I would have loved to see two Spartacuses from like less than a year apart. It would have been like some Armageddon Deep Impact thing.
I think he could have done it too.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And this is like, same year as Magnificent Seven and everything, so it might have taken a little bit longer, but even still, can you imagine? Like, it can't have been bad, or if it was, it would have been legendarily bad, and that would have just been next level. Like, have you ever seen Spartacus with Yul Brynner? It's it would be like this thing that Hollywood has tried to erase in the 60 years since then, like that Jerry Lewis movie, The Day the Clown Cried. It would just be so... We're 4 more years. We're going to get to see it.
Oh yeah. It's coming up.
Yeah. I can't wait. I can't wait to do that. That will be like a weird extra milestone in some fashion. But anyway, yeah. And, the most fascinating thing about this is that, what I was mentioning earlier with how it relates to Kubrick's career, Stanley Kubrick was a director for hire on this movie that they brought in after production had started. They had filmed the opening sequence, which is taking place in this huge like mountain range, this huge quarry and everything. They had gotten director Anthony Mann, who had directed a handful of westerns, couple of noir movies, and it was clear within a week that like, okay, this Mann guy is really not cut out for this. Like they could tell that this was not going to be able to be sustained for the entire production period. And it's like I say, never trust someone named Mann. They're always up to no good, especially with 2 N's. That's the secret.
Yeah. It's an Interstellar reference or what?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a reference to a few things. Weirdly enough, just a few weeks ago on Extra Milestone, we did Michael Mann's Heat. So I guess I'm going to have to eat those words retroactively.
Now, Mann did the salt mine opening, right?
Yeah, the opening scene where we are first introduced to Spartacus, who's
the guy's slave shopping.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Peter Ustinov shows up and is like, "Oh, I like that one. There's some nice muscle on that one," and is taken to this camp.
That
just that first scene is directed by Anthony Mann. As far as I know, they did not reshoot that. So one little,
like
uncredited director
bit. Douglas didn't get along. From what I've read, that was like one of the main factors for him being fired, I think. Yeah,
more or less. They were just kind of not seeing eye to eye. The thing you'll find out very quickly in doing research for this is that this is way more so than a Kubrick auteur project. This is a Kirk Douglas joint. Like it's one of those things where the actor really is driving it.
I did producer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he's kind of the main driving force behind this. But you do see a lot of really great cinematography that you would kind of associate with Kubrick later on down the line in retrospect. So that's really interesting. Now, at last, we get to the interesting part of the show where we talk about kind of our history with it. So, Jason, I want to start with you. What is I imagine that you heard about this movie some time ago. Was there any particular reason? Because this was your first time seeing it, correct?
Yeah.
Was there any reason that you put it off for as long as you did, or just never got around to it?
Honestly, I just a lot of the older Stanley Kubrick movies, I just either I haven't had access to them, or I don't know, haven't wanted to watch them really. I think this is the oldest one I've seen.
Oh, really? You haven't seen Paths of Glory?
I haven't seen Paths of Glory, Fear and Desire, the other ones. What about the
Paths of
airplane
Glory
or
and
whatever?
maybe The Killing are the only ones.
Oh, okay.
really
No,
worth seeking out.
I'm stupid. I've seen The Killing. I watched that a couple weeks ago.
Oh, really?
So I've seen that.
Well, that's nice.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I take back everything.
But so this is definitely lower on the chronological list then.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And what about you, Guy? Was this also your first watch of this?
Yeah, this is my first watch of this. I had seen plenty of clips of this movie previously, but I never was too interested in watching it, mainly just because it never really looked like a Kubrick movie.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was odd. And so I always just kind of just put it off to the side. And I was like, I'll get to it eventually,
That is kind of the weird thing, is that, as much as I want to say like, oh yeah, we can see, the seeds that would blossom into the Kubrick we know now. There's no particular reason that this couldn't have been done by another director of epics. Matter of fact, David Lean was in line to direct this, who did Lawrence of Arabia, Bridge on the River Kwai, and little behind the scenes fact, listeners, and Dr. Zhivago, a movie we almost considered adding to this week's lineup, and then ultimately decided 3 is enough, dear God. So but yeah, so maybe someday we'll circle back around and get to that. But yeah, there's nothing like insanely Kubrick-y about this movie, so I think I can definitely see why. Anthony, I'll ask you the same question. How did you first hear about this movie?
Well, I've only seen it once, but I didn't watch it for this. I just happened to have watched it a few weeks ago.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I've heard of it. Everybody knows the classic "Like I Am Spartacus" scene.
Right.
Like that's been parodied in a million TV shows and movies,
including Life of Brian, kind of the
yeah.
most obvious one, where it's kind of the reverse, where they say like, all right, if you're Brian, you cannot be crucified. And everyone's like, oh, I'm Brian. And so is my wife.
Exactly.
Hilarious.
This movie had a less enjoyable crucifixion scene.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't bring the cheer. They didn't bring the music. Very disappointing overall.
Nor did they intend to be fair. But
this movie wasn't even a little funny, you guys. I don't know what we're talking about.
Is there anything funny in this movie? I can't recall off the top of my head.
I guess it's cruel and funny, but the
kind
kid,
of maybe I don't remember. I don't remember anything.
The kid
They're
getting
actually
goat milk
humor.
in the face.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe that.
Didn't he drown someone in chili or something?
He drowned someone in
good.
soup.
Yeah, that was
Soup.
That dude broke his jaw during that scene.
That is such
really?
Yeah.
That is such a Roman Republic way to kill someone, like drowning them in just food. Like
The
that's
spark
what
of
it
the
takes.
revolution right there.
Mm-hmm.
What was I going to say a second ago? Oh yeah, there's one scene that I find like kind of funny, but obviously it wasn't intended to be, just because of hindsight and stuff. There's a scene that when I first saw it, I thought was completely random, and then I realized there's a very clear subtext I was missing out on the first time, and it's a scene where there is some very obvious coded bisexual subtext where you've got Laurence Olivier as Crassus, who's kind of the antagonist of the movie, and then you got Tony Curtis as Antoninus, who's kind of an underling for a little while, and then ultimately joins Spartacus and the other rebelling slaves and stuff. But there's a scene where it's just Antoninus like massaging Crassus, and then Crassus is saying like, so some people prefer oysters, some prefer snails. I happen to prefer both. And it's so random without that subtext. And I'm amazed it flew over my head the first time. So
that scene was lost for a little bit.
Yeah, it was cut out of the theatrical version.
Yeah.
Because it's so extraneous, you could tell it was just kind of a cheeky thing that they threw in. I'd be curious to find out if that was in the book or not, or if that was just something that someone on the set had the bright idea, like, let's throw in this really random, like, bisexual subtext.
I mean, maybe Trumbo thought of it.
Maybe so.
Oh, maybe. Yeah,
makes sense. That kind of stuff is all over those movies of the era. If you look hard enough, going back to like the dawn of cinema, obviously. So I find that scene kind of amusing just because of what it is and the nature of it and how it fits into this movie and history at large. But yeah, I think what you were mentioning, the whole I Am Spartacus scene, that's kind of what the movie is most famous for now. This really famous kind of a crescendo, some would call it. And it's quotable, of course, because it's a bunch of people saying the same line. It's rather simplistic.
It's a scene that it's a lot of movies use that as an example to show how, courageous characters can show their courage and bravery and selflessness. That I think this is a really good example. And it seems corny now that it's been done so many times, but it's a very good moment in the movie.
No, I teared up during that. Single tear just
affected me
like,
emotionally.
Just like Douglas, he's just got that single tear. Oh, it's great.
There you go. The Lord of the Rings tear. I bet that was the inspiration right there. I honestly didn't find it corny at all. I also thought it was very moving. So I guess we've got three sort of newcomers here. Let's just continue with you, Anthony. What did you think of it? What are your takeaways from this?
I mean, of all the epics we watched for this episode, this one seemed it seemed to be the purest form of epic. Like it's a grand adventure. It has the love story. It has the big villain. It has the big battle scenes. It has the tragic ending. Yeah.
It got the scope. It's got the length. It's the longest of the three movies.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like when I think of epic, I think of movies like this, like Ben-Hur, Cleopatra, of this kind of time period. The epics of the 60s. Color was becoming huge at this time. It was really popping more, and I enjoyed it for the scope of it. And I also liked that the action, the combat scenes are very, very well done. Yeah. I had a lot of fun with those. I think it's hard to pull off action in that time period because like the blood always seems extra bright red because it's like paint or something. And then some of the sword fighting, you can tell they're pulling away. But I thought, they really went for it in this movie, and it really showed. And I thought, even though Kubrick was like the director for hire, you can still see the skill and talent he brought to it. And like I enjoyed it very much.
Right. Especially in the photography, like I was mentioning earlier.
Yeah.
As it turns out, Kubrick was really at odds with the cinematographer. Yeah. Russell Meddy a lot was like trying to tell him how to do his job. And Russell Meddy kind of like disowned this movie for a little while until he won an Oscar for it and was like, water under the bridge. It is what it is.
I heard statue.
I heard that Kubrick shot most of it himself without the cinematographer.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. And then I can only imagine how he felt when he won an Oscar and was like, I did that. Right. Well, it wasn't your job, Stanley. So I guess there's only
look
so
at the credits, bub.
Exactly.
Didn't Kubrick also not or kind of disown this?
Yeah.
Not necessarily disown, but just kind of disregard in a certain way. Like it's not like how should I say this? It's not like something that he believes isn't true to himself. It's just kind of a thing that he doesn't really think about. Like, oh yeah, I did that. Like it was, it was a year out of my life, whatever. You can tell that the enthusiasm was mostly in the writing and the acting. And honestly, that comes through more than enough. I can't see it being much better with a like really, really enthusiastic director and everything. Like Kubrick didn't phone it in.
No,
maybe emotionally, but certainly not on any technical level.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a well done production.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because from what I read, he just really was not a fan of the character of Spartacus. He just didn't, I don't know. He just thought he was interchangeable with really any other hero.
Yeah, I heard he said that he thought the character wasn't flawed enough. He thought the character was like too perfect.
I read that too. I can kind of see it. I also I don't think it's a very classical kind of story. Like it's at this point like millennia old, so it makes sense that it would kind of harken back to really traditional storytelling techniques. It's a very Joseph Campbell kind of thing. It's very much like, the rise from rock bottom to show those in power, like who we really are and everything, and then leads a heroic death and everything, and then goes on to leave a legacy that is greater than anyone could ever have imagined for, from such rags and such riches, or lack of riches, I suppose, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Anthony, what you brought up about the action, which is very impressive. There are a couple of battle scenes, a couple of gladiatory fights throughout the movie. One in particular where the army of former slaves are like, I don't even know what they are. They're these giant flaming cylinders that they have attached to ropes that they're just sort of rolling towards the Roman Republic.
And they run over a bunch of people too. It's incredible.
Yeah.
They really get hit there.
I would be amazed. Like, I'm sure,
I don't know.
or I guess I'm not sure. Like, I like to think they had protective gear on, but
who knows?
Who knows? Maybe they just said to hell with it. In
It was
the
already
first,
over budget. Yeah.
James Cameron had Arnold Schwarzenegger just punch a window with his bare fist in the first Terminator, and that was decades later. So safety is not always the paramount thing on filmmakers' minds.
But yeah, that fire is incredible.
Yeah. But the action that is there is really fantastic. There are huge fights. There are smaller, intimate fights. Now, Jason, I remember we were talking about this or we were texting about this actually earlier this week about how there's kind of an interesting perception of this movie with a lot of people where it's kind of hard to quantify what genre it is, because as much as there are the cool, big, epic, sweeping action scenes and everything, it's mostly dialogue. It's mostly talking. It's mostly just working things out, figuring out what's the next move we're going to make, cutting back and forth between good guys and the bad guys, that kind of stuff. Do you think that maybe that has led this movie to be kind of to have kind of an interesting legacy where it is not often brought up when talking about Kubrick's filmography specifically? Like, it kind of blends into just movies in general. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, so one thing, I think somebody said this earlier, but one thing Kubrick movies aren't is boring. And like Barry Lyndon, the second half slows down quite a bit, but it's never boring. But I'd say Spartacus kind of does do that though, where at least the middle portion and some of the last third can be a bit sluggish, and that's just because I don't know. I never found the dialogue to be that compelling during these scenes.
It's pretty functional for the most part.
Yeah, it's serviceable for like an epic,
Yeah,
especially
that's kind of the rock and the hard place that I found with a lot of these big Hollywood epics of the era and beyond, is that there's kind of this compromise that they have to make. We're like, okay, we've got a huge budget behind this thing. We got all these locations, all these stunts, the huge crew and everything. Do we feel the need to edit it down? You know, like, why not just leave everything in, let this be as big as it can be? That's kind of the function of the epic in a lot of ways, is to be as big as possible, even at the risk of maybe maybe outstaying its welcome here and there.
Yeah.
Guy and Anthony, did you have a thought on kind of the pacing on this movie and how it keeps going along, or maybe doesn't?
I've felt that a lot of it, like, they try to sprinkle in some good action to keep it thrilling.
Mm-hmm.
But there is, like you were saying, there is a lot of just talking, and Tony Curtis is probably he might be my favorite character just because he talks really well.
Mm-hmm.
His dialogue worked, and he was very fun to watch. But I think pacing, it was a little, like you said, like, epics are a genre, and this is certainly a genre, epic, where it checks all the boxes. And could it have been a really strong, tight 2-hour movie? Maybe.
Yeah, 2.5 even.
Maybe even 2.5. But I don't think it's a mistake that they let it go on so long.
Yeah, I agree. I think they chose their battles, and I think they chose them well, even if there are parts that are rather tedious that I think could have very easily been trimmed down. It just wouldn't have been the same spirit, Yeah. Guy, how did you feel about the pacing of the movie?
Yeah, pretty much the same as you guys. It's just, the sections that are a little rough to go through, but I do love a good Senate scene. Which is why I love Star Wars prequels.
Yes.
I am the Senate.
I love a good, everyone being loud and boisterous in a Senate setting.
Just Tony Curtis shouting, "Unlimited power."
Exactly.
And especially when you got, like, Laurence Olivier. We haven't even mentioned the whole cast. We got Laurence Olivier, Charles Laughton, director of Night of the Hunter and Nothing Else, which is a crime, but also a very accomplished actor, Shakespearean actor, as a matter of fact, and is really magnificent in this movie. Kirk Douglas, of course, Peter Ustinov, and playing the kind of the lover of Spartacus, whom he meets along the way, is Gene Simmons. No, not that one. I know what you're thinking.
That was my immediate reaction when I saw that name come up.
Same here.
No.
I was like, oh, the rock star.
Right. I was like, no way.
Jean Simmons is who we're talking about. And I really love her character in this movie. I think she brings a lot of heart to it, a lot of pathos. Not necessarily the most fleshed out or three-dimensional character, which is a little frustrating.
Yeah.
But even still, I think this is, they're telling the story they feel like telling.
Yeah, I think their scenes together are really sweet.
Oh yeah, a really, really remarkable chemistry. Frankly,
her theme. I don't know if it's her theme or if it's just like the love theme of it, but that is beautiful. They have that one scene where they're in the forest somewhere. I don't know if they're in the forest for half of this movie, but they're just like. It's hard to explain, but they're just like really. They're just like laughing about her escaping something, and there's something just really sweet about it that isn't really in other movies of the time, where both people are just like laughing with each other. I don't know, something about it.
When the ultimate like sacrifice kind of thing takes place, it actually feels like something is being lost. Like this was really, these were people who interacted with each other and had relationships, romantic and otherwise. So it really,
that final scene.
The tragedy really comes
the final
through.
scene.
The final scene is great.
I love that. Yeah, it's really fantastic.
Yeah, I didn't expect this movie to be as emotional as it was.
Mm-hmm.
Same.
Especially in that second half.
Yeah,
that's a weird thing.
The boring stuff, but
yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of tedious stuff. As we said, it runs hot and cold when it comes to being really intriguing on a moment-to-moment basis. That's kind of the interesting thing I found with rewatching this, because I just realized I never clarified earlier. I saw this once years ago. I just turned into William Shatner for whatever reason years ago, and it's so weird. I only recalled just the other day when I was rewatching it. Oh yeah, I fell asleep for like half of it that first time. So it's a crime that I ever considered myself to have watched it, because I really missed out on something really impactful. What got me right off the bat was the early scenes, and they spend a long time, because they've got it. They spend a long time just showing Spartacus's life as a slave, and just how miserable it was to be a slave under the Roman Republic, just this tyrannical force that was rolling all of Mediterranean, really, with this iron fist, just this uncaring tyrannical power and everything. There's a scene that I also found, this is actually another scene I found kind of weirdly funny. The subject matter isn't funny, but just kind of the context of it, where they have like essentially kind of conjugal visits for the slaves. Like they just kind of pair them up and send them to these cells and say like, do whatever you feel like. And Spartacus gets paired up with someone and says, I've never been with a woman before. I'm like, sure, Kirk Douglas, I'm sure you haven't. I got a little kick out of that. But yeah, it really shows just how miserable this thing is that they're escaping, to the point where, and it doesn't happen early on. Like it takes a while for them to really build up the the courage, if nothing else, to escape. There's this great irony to it where they're training the slaves to fight each other in little gladiator arenas, as they just sort of look on from the big awning that they have and stuff. They never consider that, we're training our captives to rebel against us while we just, eat grapes directly off the vine and stuff. So there's this irony right off the bat, and it's really triumphant. I didn't mention earlier, but one of these slaves is played by the great Woody Strode, who I recognized immediately from Once Upon a Time in not Hollywood, in the West, in this opening scene, where it's like this 10-minute scene of these three cowboys just waiting at a train station for Charles Bronson to show up. Woody Strode is one of those cowboys, and eventually kind of sacrifices himself in the initial escape that they instigate. So really great character there. When it comes to, I want to talk a little bit about the kind of the thematic material of this movie, because I was thinking, This is actually a really rather simplistic movie at the end of the day, just when it comes to the messaging. Does everyone kind of concur with that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that makes it not really feel like a Kubrick movie.
Yeah. Is that you can tell he just sort of came in, the story was already written, he just kind of had to do that,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, does that, I guess this is the question I really wanted to ask. Does that matter a whole lot? Like, is it too distracting to know that that this is a Kubrick movie and that it's so, as epics go, pretty straightforward? It's an underdog story, more or less. And it doesn't go much deeper than that. Of course, there's history involved and everything, but even still, did anyone have a thought on that?
I think it's okay that it's pretty simplistic. I think I've never had a problem with, like, as long as the conclusion makes sense and it feels natural for the story and characters. I don't care how simple it is. What it's not like they don't beat you over the head with the message, but it's there, that's what I like, and I don't think that really distracts. Like, I think maybe you could approach it like a Shyamalan comparison, like, where's the twist ending? Where's the confusing meaning in this? And I don't think that could really, if you go into it looking for meaning, you could, this is a big film student thing. They just make up meaning. Like, the way he holds the spear means blah, blah, blah. Just, crap like that. Like, he stepped through the door with his left foot. That means metaphors. Just crap like that. I'm okay with that not being there, and I know that's very easy to pick apart in other Kubrick movies, and I don't think it's really distracting here.
Yeah. It's really big, kind of brassy Hollywood filmmaking at its best, to the point where I think if I were to introduce or show this movie to someone, I wouldn't introduce it as a Kubrick movie. Like I might not even mention that entirely. I might just say like, this is a Hollywood epic from 1960, one of the most iconic and still one of the best. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I haven't seen a lot of epics from this time period, but if they're anything like this, I would watch them because overall I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, Ben-Hur is really similar. That's the obvious comparison. Lawrence of Arabia is a lot more complex, but it's the same it's the same filmmaking spirit. A lot of David Lean movies, as a matter of fact, so it makes sense that they would tap him to direct it. So yeah, they're out there. A lot of them have completely disappeared, which is weird. But a lot of them still hold up great to this day. And it's a kind of movie that just isn't really much of a thing anymore. Granted, nothing is much of a thing this year, but even outside of that, it's just not a thing you see. And if you do, it just doesn't have the same feeling. And they usually fail quite badly, which is a shame, of course, but it's always good to be able to go back. And so I'm glad they were getting to do 3 of them today, which is exciting.
Yeah, I mean, this movie's legacy, from what I know, is just like the Spartacus. I'm Spartacus scene.
Yeah, and matter of fact, that scene actually has maybe one of the few bits of little contemporary connections. That scene is in the book and was initially intended as a comment on the whole blacklisting thing that was going on. So it's only fitting that Trumbo would eventually end up getting involved. That's a whole metaphor about showing solidarity in the midst of chaos when it seems like they're just out to get everyone and to sort of mold everyone in their image, essentially, forcefully or otherwise, and just saying no and taking a stand. That's what it's all about. So it's even more inspirational as a result of that.
Yeah, it kind of like set the tone for like what would be like the nature of like the rebellious 60s,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That's a good point. I'm sure that this movie was sort of brought up a lot in that kind of counterculture rhetoric. That's fascinating. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I was wondering, we talked a lot about Spartacus. Did anyone have anything else specifically they wanted to bring up about this before we move on to our third and final epic of the evening?
There's lots of people in this.
That's true.
Lots of people.
Does anyone know how many extras are in this?
Oh, goodness. I
at least
remember
5.
reading it.
Yeah, at least.
At the very least.
Yeah. Because that scene, the most cute Kubrick part to me was that at the beginning of the big battle scene when those the army from far away just gets into like its formation. It's beautiful. But oh my God, there's so
that was
many
an intense
people.
scene.
Yeah. That's
with
incredible.
the fire rolling over people. That was a lot.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Jason, I have a number for you. It was a budget of $12 million at the time, which is equivalent to $105 million today.
Okay.
And Kubrick was like, did not take this lightly. This was bigger by far than anything he had ever done. So this was maybe a little bit of a rite of passage. And a cast of, all told, 10,500.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Christ.
No wonder Anthony Mann was like, dude, I'm out. Like,
That's so much.
There's only so much I could do. So they call these epic for a reason. I think it's very
Yeah.
And so with that, unless anyone had anything else, what say we move on to our third and final film of the evening. The only one not directed by Stanley Kubrick, directed by Akira Kurosawa, in fact, who happens to be my favorite director, as I mentioned on several occasions. This is, I think, the third Kurosawa movie in the Extra Milestone history, and certainly will not be the last. There are lots of classics to go over as the years roll by. But we got one more to talk about in the year 2020, and that is kind of the last huge movie that Kurosawa directed, and a lot of people claim it's one of the best. We'll see what we think, but without any further ado, it is translated into English as Chaos. It is Ron.
With an A.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Thank you for that, Jason. Yeah. Thank you for that. Correct me if I'm wrong. This was also one that that you three were newcomers to, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And so I almost don't even want to ask because I feel like I kind of know the answer. I feel like at least Anthony and Jason have heard of Akira Kurosawa most from me. Like it became, there was a time when it was kind of this running gag where I would always just find a way, and this maintains to this day, where I would always find a way to bring up Akira Kurosawa. He is my favorite director, like, and it's not even close. So I try to find connections a lot of the time.
Yeah, I haven't been bullied by you lately about not seeing Seven Samurai.
Not lately. It was Solaris for the longest time.
It was Solaris, and then I watched that, and that stuff.
It's all out of jest and love. I hope you know that, Jason.
I know.
Yeah, I'm not convinced, but okay, we'll move on. Was this, and I know, Guy, that it wasn't yours, and I'll hear what you have to say in a second, but Anthony and Jason, was this both of your guys' first Kurosawa movie?
It was mine.
Fascinating. I cannot wait to hear what you thought. But first, let's build up the suspense a little bit. Guy, what's your familiarity with Akira Kurosawa?
I'd always heard of him and all of his classics. People always bring up. This is one that I never really heard people bring up that much, oddly enough. Really? I always hear, Seven Samurai and, Jimbo and, all those. But this one I never really heard people talk about for some reason. And after I watched it, I was very curious as to why, because I genuinely think it's an incredible film. And yeah, I was like, why don't people talk about this more? I'd realized that I had seen the shot of the father leaving the castle as it was burning down several times throughout different, YouTube videos and stuff, but people just never really got into too much detail about it. But yeah, no, I loved this movie.
That is so weird you say that. We clearly are frequenting different places on the internet, because I heard about this movie a ton. And maybe it helps that I was kind of diving into Kurosawa at an earlier age. I think I was like 16-ish, so I was really getting into it, but it took a little while for me to finally get to this one. Something about it I found kind of intimidating. Maybe the fact that it was one of Kurosawa's only color movies, that it was a Shakespeare adaptation, and I'm kind of notoriously and shamefully unfamiliar with most of Shakespeare's work, and so I thought maybe I couldn't really get into it. Right. And I remember it was actually also about 3 years ago. for whatever reason, I just decided, you know what, screw it, today's the day, and I gave it a watch, and I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't call it one of my favorites of Kurosawa. Maybe that'll change as I rewatch it in future dates. But yeah, I think it's really, really solid. So, Jason, let's hear from you next. What did you think of Ron? And also, I'll also ask, because I'm very curious about it, in what ways did it live up or down to your expectations, if any?
Well, so I'd seen Dreams over the summer. I don't know why that was, the first Kurosawa movie I decided to watch.
That's a weird one.
Yeah. Fantastic. Really, really great.
Martin Scorsese as Vincent Van Gogh. All you need to know.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'd seen that, which isn't, the most classic version of Kurosawa. I can't really speak on that because
it's not.
Yeah,
you're not speaking out of turn. It's unusual.
Yeah, so I was very excited to get to the kind of epic stories that he's telling, whether it's like Rashomon or which I still haven't seen. I'm sorry.
Rashomon is very intimate, so it's very opposed to Ron in almost every way.
Yeah. So I was excited to really get into the movies that everyone talks about, which is like Ron. I feel like people don't talk about Dreams that much.
Not as much, anyway.
Yeah. So, super excited for that. And I also loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I really like... I'm also not familiar with Shakespeare that much, but it's always interesting to me. And this just felt like a play that, was being acted out on location. And that's always just entertaining to me.
And very beautiful location too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Really remarkable looking movie. Yeah. It's to be clear, when it comes to the Shakespeare thing, as it turns out, you don't have to be familiar with Shakespeare. That's not as much of a caveat as you might think. This story is based a lot on King Lear, as I understand it, but it is certainly not vital to be familiar with that story, at least having not read the story. So maybe we're not the authorities to ask. But finally, let's hear from you, Anthony. I'll just ask the same question as to Jason. What did you think of Ron, and also how did it live up or down to your expectations?
Well, most of what I have heard about Kurosawa has been from other filmmakers. Like how his movies have inspired all these Westerns and Star Wars and Scorsese and Tarantino, and how that's where most of the reputation I've heard comes from. So I was expecting, I was expecting a masterpiece, because you have all these incredible filmmakers, just singing his praises. So I'm like, okay, well, let's. I'm curious, because it's not that I've been avoiding. It's just it hasn't come up. Sure. So when I watched it, I was what I was looking for. I think this is another example for me as cinema as an art form. I was looking at the framing. I was looking at the color. I was looking at the composition of the way these characters move, because they're very, the Japanese way of moving is very specific. And I think it's a very, I haven't seen a lot of movies like this. Yeah. Most of the Japanese cinema I'm familiar with is like the old Godzillas from like the 50s and 60s. Right. So
the schlock, essentially.
Yeah. The big B movies, the big, the miniatures with the guy in the suit. So I didn't have expectations other than I was expecting to see an incredible film. So, and I mean, that's what I saw. Like I was blown away by the by the shot composition and the cinematography, the use of color, the location, the way he shows that location. It's the mountainsides are insane to me.
Oh,
I couldn't deal with it. I paused it multiple times just to study, specific frames. Like, why is it here, and why did he place that character there? My favorite shot in the whole movie is when they sacked the city, the temple, and it's that shot through the window, and there's a burning arrow, and that's like one of the best shots like ever. And that's basically what I was expecting to see, because all my favorite directors, they love Kurosawa, and I think I'll be joining them.
Oh, nice! I'm glad to hear it. So this was this got you jazzed to see more, is what you're saying?
Yeah. I just in terms of studying the art of film, I was like, I'm hooked.
Very nice. Yeah, I was wondering about that going in, because when I pitched this idea to you guys, like, it must have been about a month ago now, it occurred to me, like, am I doing them a disservice? Like, is this a good introduction to Kurosawa? Because I wouldn't know, because I saw it well into my Kurosawa education, so I guess it wasn't something that I could really connect with, and it sounds like it was, so I'm glad to hear it.
I think so, yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. This story, just to give a little rundown of it, is about an elderly lord who is just ruling over this kingdom in Japan. And it's actually, I really should look up the exact time period, because I'm not entirely positive. I'll figure it out later. The point is that there's a lord, has 3 sons, and we open on like this kind of picnic thing that they're having outdoors. And it's this, just right off the bat, some of the most amazing cinematography you've ever seen. Some of the the brightest colors, and just the most elegant framing of all time. As it turns out, Akira Kurosawa was in the process of going blind when this movie was made.
Yeah.
Like the man really just had a mission, and it turned, when storyboarding this movie, wasn't just drawing what it would turn out to be, made paintings of the scenes. Like, this is like Anthony was saying, this is true. This is cinema in its most artistic form, in its most pure sense of artistic expression and everything like that. But we open on this picnic, and all of a sudden, Lord Ichimonji is falling asleep. It's like, uh-oh, what's going on here? And wakes up and is like, oh gosh, it's starting. I'm starting to slip. My mind is starting to go away. And that day decides to give control over all the land to his oldest son. And of course, and I think this is maybe kind of what the movie is getting at more than anything else, of course, conflict ensues. Where there is power, there will be conflict, no matter what. Is that something that you all were able to pick up on while seeing this?
No money, no problems. Yeah, that's really, I think
it's
Kurosawa was trying to say. Yeah.
It's really implicit in the title, which is chaos. I think it's such a brilliant title, because it gives this impression right off the bat that, like, there will be, because we have these systems, whatever you want to call it, like government, power structures, society, civilization, everything. We have these systems that have been implemented in various forms throughout the world and throughout time that have this kind of ideal form. That's one of the things that Lord Ichimonji says at the very beginning, is he does what I instantly thought of as the apes together strong thing from Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
What I thought of.
Where you get like one, in this case, arrow, easy to break. You bundle them together, and it's harder to break because they're sticking together, you know, they're stronger together and everything, when of course the youngest son is like, no, I can do it, see, I'll prove it to you. And so it sounds funny when I describe it because I'm kind of playing it up for comedic effect, but what I got right off the bat was kind of this implication that like there will always be someone who is either unsatisfied with the way things are or is maybe just curious to see if they can throw a wrench into it, whether or not they actually realize it. And because we have all these systems and they have these ideal forms, like when someone describes how it should work, it sounds great. Like, yeah, of course, you know, this person should have power, and then it's the whole separation of powers thing. This person should control that, this one should control that. It sounds like it should work perfectly, but because it's human beings with emotions and with, you know, susceptibility and things like that involved all the time, it just can't happen. And it's actually a very nihilistic movie at the end of the day, you know?
Yes, very nihilistic.
That's my favorite part about it. I like nihilism.
There you go. Yeah, this movie is very few moments of levity and hope in this movie, although there are some really magnificent performances that really steal the show for a lot of it. Jason, I want to ask, just kind of in general, besides what we've already talked about, kind of the aesthetic of it, the visual look of it, what was something that really stuck out to you about
Castle
this?
Scene.
The castle scene.
The castle raid.
You're
oh
talking
my
about
goodness.
when it's kind of the initial, kind of the first huge conflict, you know?
Yeah, that's incredible.
Sound drops out.
Yeah, sound drops out. They have arrows flying. I mean, how do you guys know how they do the arrows things? Like how they do that? Because it seems dangerous.
It is. Oh, I'm sure it's undoubtedly dangerous.
Yeah.
I know that what they did for certain movies, I don't know if for this one in particular, but they would reverse the footage where they would have some way of pulling the arrow out of the wall really rapidly using like a string or something.
But there's no way they're doing that in this one.
I know. There's just too damn many of them.
Someone will be at a door, run into the door, and then a second after, 3 arrows hit the door right where he was.
Incredibly precise archers, I suppose.
That was my theory, I guess.
And high-paid stuntmen.
Yeah,
It's amazing no one died on this set. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's the scene, I'm sure you guys saw, some guys just getting run over by a horse. Getting stepped on by a horse. He's just laying there. And there's a bunch of horses going over him, and most of them missing, but a few trample his legs.
Definitely hit him.
Yeah, it's brutal. And then there's the whole little almost montage of just people falling off horses.
A lot of montages of death.
Yeah. But yeah, that castle scene is beautiful.
It's insane. And I'm going to tell you something, Jason. That whole thing where the music drops out and everything, that's very uncharacteristic of a lot of the earlier Kurosawa movies. There's very few of like the black and white ones that have something like this. So this is really, it's really sets itself apart in that way. A lot of the time, Kurosawa would just go for the diegetic sound in a lot of the earlier samurai movies and everything. Maybe have like a really understated score in the background, but not much else. This, it's all score for so long. And then there's this one...
It's a long scene.
Yeah, it's a really long scene, but it's really riveting. And then there's just this thing that happens, and then bam, the diegetic sound comes back in, and it's
the silence is broken by a gunshot in the guy's back.
Right.
It's breathtaking.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
remember that. I was like, oh,
I didn't even notice that.
Damn.
Yeah.
you didn't notice that the sound came back?
I mean, no, I was just like paralyzed by that scene.
It's a paralyzing scene.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to, the kind of what I was talking about a second ago with some of the actors who steal the show, most notably is the widow of Lord Ichimonji's eldest son, who, as it turns out, is this cackling kind of manipulator of everything, and is awesome every time she's on screen. Like there's this part where she looks down and just sees like a bug or a grasshopper crawling there, and I didn't know if this was planned or not. I expected her to like pick it up and just put it in her mouth and eat it whole. Like that's the kind of character we're talking about here. There's an operatic nature to this movie that is not realistic, obviously. I think that kind of goes without saying, but it is telling this story as if it's like literally the only place in the world, and it feels huge. And it's not like Barry Lyndon where it has kind of this irony to it, although it weirdly comes to kind of a similar nihilistic conclusion. It's really all highlighting just kind of the tragedy of it all, and I think it's really effective.
Yeah. Something that I thought was kind of interesting is that, because Anthony, earlier you brought up Godzilla, is that the first AD of this movie was actually the director of Godzilla.
You're kidding.
What?
That is amazing.
Oh, I did not know that. That's fantastic.
That is my favorite thing I've learned today.
Ishiro Honda was the AD on this?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I can't believe that. That's fantastic. Clearly, I have not done my research, so thank you for that, guy.
No problem.
When was it that we were talking about the kind of the blood that looks like red paint? Because that
Spartacus,
does not hold a candle to this.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very bright.
The blood in this movie is insane.
Yeah, the whole scene in the like we were just talking about the castle raid, just buckets and buckets of blood all over the place. That scene was just so intense. I love that scene.
Yeah. It's just I think that's really kind of the highlight of the movie is what we're establishing.
Yeah. Especially like just to me, I said it earlier, the where he's looking for the sword. I assumed like to commit seppuku or something, and I think he's you know the just the way the camera moves, because it's like it's fire. He's almost on fire. That's how close he is to the fire.
Oh, that like shot. Yeah.
And then there's just the way the arrows line up, and there's a lot of fire. Like, how did that actor not pass out from smoke inhalation?
Yeah.
Like it's crazy how intense just of a production it looked like. Like it's, to me, it seemed like as impressive as, you know, any epic ever made, even though this is kind of the biggest scene in the movie. It feels like the effects of this, I was still thinking about this scene throughout the rest of the movie, because it was so specific and so quiet and so like you know, I've never seen a scene like this that just cut out the sound that way. Like it made it seem so much more tragic. Like it wasn't supposed to be exciting. It was supposed to be, you know, horrifying, and it was. And it looked, I can't get over some of the things they just pulled off for this movie.
You never saw Hunger Games?
There you go.
Kind of perfected it in that one.
Quote of the evening right there.
They really figured it out.
Akira Kurosawa can learn a lot from Hunger Games. That's the lesson I'm learning.
Akira Kurosawa ran, no pun intended, so that the Hunger Games... Wait, no, I got that backwards. No, Kurosawa walked so the Hunger Games could run.
Could run in the opposite direction with that CGI.
I really screwed that one up. There's this, with all of just the haywire stuff going on throughout at least the action scenes, and even a lot of the dialogue scenes even throughout this movie, there's this overarching kind of attitude that I detect of how did it come to this. And on one hand, it's shameful, but also it's kind of like I was saying earlier, it is inevitable when we leave such huge ideas, such huge decisions to people, you know, but who by their very nature are conflicted and are inconsistent, and who fail more often than not, which is a very Kurosawa theme. And it all leads to just a pile of rubble in the end. Things fall to the ground, and that's kind of the way things are. So bit of a downer of a movie, come to think of it.
Yeah, it's very bleak, and I appreciated how so much of the movie kind of takes place on the plains, where it's just like the ground is just black and dark and just everything's so bleak.
Yeah,
and I think it really matches the tone of the film.
What's most interesting about that is that during the production, and I don't recall how far into the production it was, but it was somewhere along the way, Akira Kurosawa's wife, I hope I pronounced this right, Yoko Yaguchi, died somewhat unexpectedly, and Kurosawa only took one day to mourn and then just went right back to work. And then when this movie came out, it was this huge deal. And actually what happened was that Sidney Lumet, of all people, advocated and said, Academy, you gotta step outside the U.S. You gotta nominate Kurosawa for Best Director, and they did. And he ended up losing, of course. But it's fascinating how
Who did he lose
things
to?
like that. Who I can't remember the name, but whoever directed Out of Africa. I'll look that up in a second.
Wait,
but
did Robert Redford direct that? Am I thinking of the right
you're
movie?
thinking of Ordinary People. That was 1980.
Okay.
But yeah, even still, it was a huge hit in the U.S. more so than a lot of similar movies of the era and from that time period. And yeah, the thing I find most fascinating about it is that it was released in 1985, and yet it is so not an 80s movie in air quotes. Like,
I was surprised to see that this was released in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It seems like something that could have come out in like the 50s, of course, barring maybe technological limitations they may have had. And it just goes to show like how long someone can really carry a torch for a story in this way and just pour their heart and soul into it. And this is not long after Kurosawa had gained a little bit of a resurgence, not just in his career but in his life. He attempted to take his own life in the early 70s, and it was going back into the movies that kind of saved his life, and this was one of them. And the huge success was just the icing on the cake. And it's not well known outside of cinephiles. So my question is, should it be? Do you think this is an effective way to kind of introduce someone to maybe a cinematic world that maybe they're not familiar with?
Well, outside of cinephiles, I think it definitely helps that it's in color. I think the number one, like when I try to convince people to watch an older movie, they're like, black and white, as if it's just gonna make you go blind or something. So I think it, like, show them this, and then maybe after this some of the black and white stuff. Then I think that alone is a pretty good reason to definitely get this a wider audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of it. It's just it's huge storytelling, which is really recognizable to us. So that certainly helps. Just to clarify, Kurosawa lost the Oscar to Sidney Pollack, director of Out of Africa.
Okay.
So how about that?
Interesting.
Yeah, strange. I haven't seen Out of Africa, so I can't really comment on it. But it would have been nice to say Academy Award winner Akira Kurosawa, but you know what? He's too good for that award. That's what I say.
Was he nominated for anything else ever?
No, this was the only one.
Wow.
His movies were nominated on a lot of occasions, a lot of them for foreign film and stuff, but not Kurosawa specifically, no.
It's a shame.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, he's above them.
Damn right.
He doesn't need them.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, Sam, being Kurosawa's number one fan, where does this one rank for you?
Let's not put anyone up on a pedestal here, Jason, but
The biggest expert on Kurosawa.
Yeah.
not even close.
The number
Not even
one
close.
authority on Akira Kurosawa, ladies and gentlemen.
Challenge him on Twitter now.
He wants to defend his title. He was telling us earlier before the show. He's like, all these
Twitter
scrubs
snitches.
out there think they know things.
Twitter snitches.
I never called anyone a snitch.
Sure.
I'll take it. I'll take it. You asked where this ranks. There's so many.
I know. I'm sorry.
Great ones. Like I can't think of a single one that I don't like, and I've seen of the 32, I've seen a good 20 to 25 of them. So certainly the majority. To say that this might not even be in my top 10 is not so much a slight on this movie, so much as it is a compliment to Kurosawa's entire body of work. So somewhere around 10, maybe give or take.
Okay.
Certainly in the top 15,
looks like.
undoubtedly.
And so, do you think it's a good introduction?
I think I would personally start with something a little more traditional, something that's not quite as long, because again, this is another one where the length might be a little difficult.
Rashomon?
Also the whole color thing. Rashomon might be a good one. I think that's a great one. I think Yojimbo was my introduction, and it was a damn good one, so it's very hard to go wrong there. And also the sequel, Sanjuro, like that'd be a great 1-2 punch. Sanjuro, by the way, which has the greatest samurai sword fight in movie history, and I'm not going to say what happens because it's a cool reveal, but it's something else. So I highly recommend that. And yeah, there are a few of the more contemporary thrillers, like High and Low would be a great one to start with.
Yeah, I really want to check that one out.
Yeah, there's just it's hard to go wrong. I would certainly not steer anyone away from watching this or any of them first. It's not like there's not one that I would say save for later specifically.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm just excited to hear that it served as a functional introduction for you and Anthony. So that's really nice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really cool stuff in this movie. Lot of just really great cinema to unpack. We could go on for quite a while, but I think it's fair to say that we've gone on for quite some time already. So I'd like to ask, is there anything else that anyone specifically wanted to mention about Kurosawa's run?
I don't think I have anything, unless you guys do.
I think we covered it.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, again, like all these, like any one of these could have necessitated their whole own conversation, but I guess such is the nature of Extra Milestone. So I was delighted to get to discuss them in the capacity that we did. I was delighted to introduce some of them to a lot of you, and I had fun rewatching them and talking about them, and having this sweet reunion of sorts at long last. And all I hope is that one day we can do it as God intended in person one day, without having to deal with all this technological stuffy stuff, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yes.
That sounds delightful.
Yes.
Absolutely. Oh my. Okay, so without any further ado, let's do our outros here. So I'll start with Jason Reed himself. Jason, where can the listeners go if they so desire to see what you're up to on the net?
Letterbox? I don't know. I don't do anything. I don't post things.
There's a reason I did Jason first. Let's move on to Guy.
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Guy_Simons Jr.
Very nice. Please do that. I highly recommend it. And Anthony, where can they find you?
I'm also just on Letterboxd because I don't trust none of them social medias.
Damn right.
Just Anthony Battaglia on Letterboxd, and that's about it.
Very nice.
Fancy.
I'm on Letterboxd as well on that site at just my name, Sam Nolan. Relatively easy to find. I'm also on Twitter at Nolan Sam, and I'm also on TikTok, of course, at Nolan Sam.
Of course.
I do lots of funny, silly voice impressions and stuff, and it's a fun time. So if you feel like it, go check me out there. And at long last, I think that's about all we got, to quote our old podcast from the 1st century BC. I'm Sam Noland.
From Barry Lyndon's libido, I am Anthony.
Dear God.
A lot of space to cover there.
In Ireland, I'm known as an Irish upstart. I'm Guy Simons Jr.
And from under my bed, because I've been recording this under my bed, I'm Jason.
And we'll see you, I hope, on the next Extra Milestone.